learn about Washington State University research regarding evaluating PE mulch and BDM in red raspberry. Now let's move to part two question. Will be your experience and opinions towards the use of polyethylene mulch, which is PE, in kimberry operation. How familiar are you with the PE mulch for weed management? Oh, oh, it, it's presenter mode here. It's weird. I mean, mm-hmm. I I don't know. It's a presenter mode here. Chris, can you? I'm sorry for the technology issues. It happens all the time.
Wow, that's weird. I've never seen it reverse like that.
So
It's probably turning point.
yeah.
Hold on, make sure this is off. Tell a funny joke. Is it this slide?
Yeah, I think so. Chris, you show the answers.
Sorry.
Never mind.
Is anything right?
Yeah, that looks great. Let's redo. Maybe let's. Oh, I think this one is cool. I'm sorry. This one is done. How do you think PE mulch impacts weed management compared to herbicide in your kimberry field? How do you think PE mulch impacts weed management compared to hand weeding in your kimberry production? How do you think PE mulch impacts parasitic nematodes populations such as Rulian nematodes compared to bare ground in kimberry production? How do you think PE mulch impacts kimberry yield compared to bare ground production? With respect to kimberry production, which of the following benefits of PE mulch interest you the most? How do you think PE mulch impacts on-farm profitability compared to bare ground production? With respect to kimberry production, do you have any concerns about PE mulch use? During which of the following years did you use PE mulch in your kimberry planting? If you have used the PE mulch in your kimberry operation, how satisfied have you been with its performance? What is the likelihood that you will use PE mulch in your kimberry operation in 2020? What's the likelihood that you will use it in next 5 years? Now I'm going to ask some similar question regarding BDM. Then we'll start sharing different results from our different trials. How familiar are you with BDM, which is biodegradable plastic mulch for weed management in kimberry production? How do you think BDM impacts weed management compared to herbicide? How do you think BDM impacts weed management compared to hand weeding? How do you think BDM impacts parasitic nematodes population compared to bare ground in kimberry production? How do you think BDM impacts kimberry yield compared to bare ground production? With respect to kimberry production, which of the following benefits of BDMs interest you the most? How do you think BDM impact on-farm profitability compared to bare ground production? With respect to kimberry production, do you have any concerns about BDM use? During which of the following years have you used the BDM in your operation? If you have used the BDM in your kimberry operation, how satisfied have you been with their performance? What's the likelihood that you will use BDM in 2020? What about in next 5 years? What's the likelihood that you will use it? All right, there will be four or five questions left. Just compare some opinion towards both of them. How do you think PE mulch and BDMs compare with regard to weed management in kimberry production? What about the yield? How do they compare? How do you think PE mulch and BDM compare with regard to on-farm profitability? Did you participate in this survey in last year's Small Fruit Conference? Okay, that's the end of the survey. Now I'm going to talk some horticulture side of this project. Again, when you leave, you can just leave this clicker on your seat or on the table there. We will collect it later. And thank you very much for participating in this. I'm going to talk about share some background and results and maybe some conclusion from me and our team regarding this project. The title is what George introduced: is plastic mulches. Is it worth it? I want to start with the red raspberry industry in Washington. And in 2018, Washington State produced around 75 million pounds red raspberry. Most of them are processing market. And in this county alone, we're at here today, Whatcom County produced over 96% of state production, making this region an extremely important place for processing red raspberry industry. And many growers are starting using tissue culture transplants instead of traditional planting materials such as bare root kings or root cuttings for many reasons. And nurseries can produce this type of plants in a small operation, in a large amount. However, some growers, they find that by using this planting material, they find these plants are difficult or hard to establish compared to traditional planting materials. And that's why I'm going to introduce you one method or one potential method that you can use to promote the establishment of these planting materials, which is a plastic mulch, polyethylene mulch, has been started used in agriculture in 1950s and it became popular in 1960s. Many potential benefits from this mulch are such as weed management, improve or conserve soil moisture, improve soil temperature, even early harvest and increase the yield as well as the fruit quality. In addition to polyethylene mulch, I also want to introduce you another type of plastic mulch, which was started in 1990s, biodegradable plastic mulches. They are designed to provide a similar horticultural benefits as polyethylene mulch. However, they are manufactured with different feedstocks and additives compared to polyethylene mulches. They are engineered to biodegrade in the soil within 2 years by microbial activities. So it has the potential to reduce the plastic waste generation. Why do we consider a biodegradable plastic mulches in a perennial crop production? First, there are a few studies that have been explored the use of biodegradable plastic mulches in red raspberry production, primarily in European countries, and the results are very promising. Secondly, instead of using polyethylene mulch, by using biodegradable mulch, there is a potential to reduce the labor cost associated with the polyethylene mulch removal and disposal. Overall, it might have the potential to increase your on-farm efficiency for their on-farm profitabilities. When it comes to use mulch, there could be another concern, which is parasitic nematodes in red raspberry production in the Pacific Northwest, Rulian nematodes. And some growers, they express that if I use mulch, that will elevate my soil temperature, moisture. Will that impact the Rulian nematodes activities in the soil? And so to answer that question, we started looking some literatures, and we found the literature in the past are inconsistent regarding their results. And the application of biodegradable plastic mulches in this specific climate might be different from application to another climate in terms of the impacts of this specific Rulian nematodes. So that's also one of the research questions we have. And then Inga Zasada, who is a nematologist, and she is actually here today. So to answer all the questions I just proposed, we established the two trials in 2017. The one trial was established in May 2017 that allows us to harvest twice in the past 2.5 years. First time 2018 summer, second time 2019 summer. Since some growers are starting to moving their planting time from early spring or spring to summer or even to late summer to early fall, we also established another trial which was established in August 2017. And because of the late establishment of this trial, we only can harvest once this summer, past the summer. For both experiments, the treatments are same. The top 4, we have 6 treatments. The top 4 are biodegradable plastic mulches, and the 5th one is a polyethylene mulch. And the last one, sorry, I thought you can see my pointer. Top 4 are biodegradable plastic mulches with different thickness, different feedstocks. And the 5th one is a polyethylene mulch, is industry standard. And the last one is bare ground control, the grower's standard practice. For the experimental design, this might be a little bit complicated for different audience, but what I want you to get from this design is that we have 2 trials. Again, one was established in spring. And in the spring trial, the grower broadcast fumigate the soil the September prior to the planting. And the cultivar used in that trial is wheat field, which is exclusively produced through tissue culture. For the summer trial, the grower bed fumigate the field just 2 months prior to the establishment. And the cultivar used in that trial was Wick Haven, which is also a cultivar only available through tissue culture technique. As for the objectives, we want to study the impacts of different plastic mulches in comparison to bare ground on different aspects: plant growth, fruit yield, weed incidence, rullian nematodes populations, soil temperature and moisture. Because this is a mulch study, particularly it involves biodegradable plastic mulches, we also want to learn what's the process or what's the time period for the on surface and in soil biodegradation for this type of plastics. Now I'm transitioning to the data collection part. The way that I categorize my data is on this slide. I have plant, I have pest, I have soil, I have mulch. Due to the time constraint for today's talk, I'm only going to share partial of the data with you, but I'll be here today if you're interested. We can talk about it. Let's start. I'm going to separate the 2 trials data and because it might be complicated, so I will share the spring trial first, followed by the summer trial, then conclusion. Again, to remind you, the spring trial was established in May 2017. And this is how we collect the primary king growth data. And the man with the reindeer or brown color here, he is collecting the number of primary kings in each plant as primary king numbers per plant, while I am here measuring the tallest leaf tip of each plant as a primary king height. This is a primary height data that we measured in 2017 growing season. I just want to focus on the last date of the data collection later, very late in October. And what we found was that the plant growth across all mulch treatments was 14 inches higher than the bare ground control, which is a green line here, the bare ground control. Similar trend was found in the primary king numbers per plant. At the end of the growing season in October, what we found was that the primary king numbers per plant across all mulch treatments was 5 more compared to the bare ground control. Now, if you look at the green line, which is bare ground control here, you will see that the average primary king number in this treatment is around 7 primary kings per raspberry plant. And the average number for all mulch treatments was around 14 primary kings per plant. That means there are, around 11 to 12. So that is 5 primary kings more across all mulch treatments compared to the bare ground control. If you calculate that, it's 71% more primary kings that have the potential to produce the fruit in the second fruiting season. So with the promising vegetative growth data, let's take a look at the yield. So what we found that across all mulch treatment, which I just highlighted here, the first harvest time, 2018 summer, we found the yield across all mulch treatments was 43% more. That's a significant growth. It's more than what we expected. Well, for 2019 harvest, we didn't notice any difference in terms of yield between different treatments, which is expected. It's expected if we look at the growth data in 2018. We went to the field again in end of the 2018, and we measured the primary cane growth data. And I also want to mention that the grower, they removed the plastic mulch earlier in 2018 season, which means that all the plants in this trial were in a pretty similar condition. So we went back to the trial in 2018 September. We want to learn whether there is a second year effect. This graph here, I'll walk you through here. Let's just focus on the left y-axis here. It's primary cane numbers per plant. And the x-axis are the treatments, 6 treatments. And the blue bar right here are the primary cane numbers per plant. And you will notice that the primary cane numbers per plant across all treatments were similar, 5 or 6. Similar for the primary cane height, which is a y-axis on the right. The primary cane height across all treatment was similar. There is no significant difference. That's why we didn't notice any difference in terms of yield in 2019, this past summer. As for weed management, the grower, they hand weeded the bare ground 3 times during the 2017 growing season. We still found that the weed population was statistically higher across under the bare ground treatments compared to all mulch treatments. As for rulin and nematodes data, and I only show the September 2018 and September 2019 data because I think they are very indicative, and I don't want to show you a complex data here. Let's start with the soil population in 2018. We found that the PE mulch actually had a higher population than one of biodegradable plastic mulches. Now let's look at the soil population in 2019. We found that bare ground actually had a higher population than PE mulch. If you know these nematodes, there are a lot of variation for these nematodes in the soil, and the root population is more indicative. Now let's take a look at the root. For 2018 root, we found that a PE mulch had a higher rooting nematodes population compared to bare ground, and one biodegradable plastic mulches. But this trend didn't continue in 2019. In 2019, one biodegradable mulch treatment had a higher nematode population than other 2 treatments. So what can we get from this table? There's no clear trend supporting that a plastic mulch or a biodegradable plastic mulch or polyethylene mulch can promote the rulin and nematodes population both in soil and root. Root population was higher under certain plastic mulches, but improved the establishment of the plants might offset the high population. And we are still continue collecting this data in this field, and we will have more to share later, but so far, this is not a concern for us as a researcher. That's for the spring trial. I'm just checking my time. Now let's move to summer trial. Summer trial or early fall trial that was established in August 2017. So we can harvest once in 2019 summer. I want to get some information from this picture right here. And again, this trial was established in August 2017. The picture was taken in January 2019. And if you see that, you can see there are a lot of exposed area from the mulch treatments. What caused it? There are multiple factors. First, when we apply the mulch, we damage some part of the mulch. And secondly, the grower, they actually, if you can tell that they planted winter wheat. Using mulch is not familiar or is not a common practice for red raspberries. So when they plant a winter wheat, there are more damage caused by these machine activities. And later, we all know that this part of the country has a lot of wind during the summer, not summertime, winter time. So that enlarge those damage. I wish we had more wind in the summer. So the mulch was damaged, but so that's why we only collect the data from the bare ground and polyethylene, because biodegradable mulch didn't survive over the winter. The polyethylene mulch survived, so we collect data from the bare ground, standard practice, and polyethylene mulch. Let's look at this plant growth data. The y-axis are the primary cane height per plant. The x-axis are the dates from monthly primary cane height data from September 2017 to September 2019. Through all those days, we only found once there is a difference between treatments where the polyethylene mulch, which is a blue bar, had a higher primary growth compared to the bare ground, but the difference is very minimum, which is why we didn't find the difference in the yield, where I highlight here the total yield for the two treatments, polyethylene and bare ground. There are no yield between those two treatments. However, we harvested 15 times in this trial. We categorize them based on the production cycle of this cultivar. For the early harvest, we found that polyethylene actually delayed the harvesting time, which is not expected because in the literature, most of the time, use of plastic mulch can hasten the harvesting time. We have several speculations. First, if you were in Whatcom County in January this year, you would notice that January was warm. We have 16 days that had a higher max temperature over 50, 60 Fahrenheit, while it followed a very, very cold, windy February. So we speculate that the buds, the primary buds in the red raspberry, they broke and started to growing in the trail, particularly for the polyethylene mulch, because the soil temperature tends to be higher under the polyethylene mulch. Then the cold February came and it just damaged the buds, damaged the primary buds, and then the secondary buds opens later, but provided a later fruiting time, harvest or fruitings. And this actually is backed up by the literature in the past. I also want to show you the weight data here. Before looking at the table, I want to let you know that the grower in this trial, they hand weighted the bare ground twice, and they also applied once herbicide only into the bare ground plots. Because of that, or even they did that, we still noticed that the weight population was still higher under the bare ground treatments compared to polyethylene, and particularly for approaching end of the season. So polyethylene mulch does provide a good weight control. What about nematodes population in this trial? Again, I want to remind you that this trial was bed fumigated, and we didn't notice nematodes in this trial. Almost no nematodes is very insignificant, particularly in the September, the 3 months ago, we collect the soil and roots data. We didn't notice any nematodes. This could be that bed fumigation really provided an effective way to suppress these nematodes. But we will continue to collect the data in this trial, and we are collecting monthly soil and roots data in another trial, which also was covered with polyethylene mulch, so we can provide a grower a year-round fluctuation in terms of the rooting nematodes population in the soil and in the roots with the use of plastic mulch and without the use of plastic mulch. So in conclusion, what I want to bring to home today are in these slides here, and I have 3 columns here. The first column is measurements. Then I compare 2 different planting times or different trials. For the soil temperature in both trials, plastic mulch can increase the soil temperature compared to bare ground control. For the weeds, the mulch, they did a great job managing the weeds. As for plant growth, in the spring planted trial, the plant growth was higher in the first year and provided a higher yield, while in the summer planted trial, we didn't notice significant difference between treatments consistently. As for the yield, we found that the yield was increased 40% under the plastic mulch in the spring trial, but there is no yield difference in the summer trial. What about ruling nematodes? So far, we don't think the use of ruling nematodes is a problem, but we'll continue to monitoring. We'll share data in the future. What do we suggest? For the spring trial, I think the use of both type of mulch are good to suppress the weeds and increase your yield. For the summer trial or early fall planting trial, because the plant won't for the summer or early fall trial, I think the use of polyethylene is good, but the biodegradable plastic mulches need to be studied. We can test the different thickness or different feedstocks of biodegradable plastic mulches. So in closing, I really thank my research team, and some of them are here today, and all the people and growers that helped during this research, as well as grower cooperator, different commission for funding resources, as well as industry inputs. Within that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Yes, Tom.
The overall cost.
The Tom question is, what about the overall cost for different practice or for different mulch?
For the different, like I guess for both, but what would it be for the, especially for the biodegradable ones?
That's a very good question. So if you recall that, I actually talk about different thickness of the mulch. Generally, if you use polyethylene mulch, which 1 mil is standard, it costs about $65 to $90 per 1,000 feet. And for biodegradable plastic mulch cost, it can be up to three times higher. But it's decreasing because it's becoming more popular. Well, in addition to your question, we are actually working on economic data, analysis data regarding different, there are a lot of factors, different mulch, different planting time, and yield and weed management practices. And we hope to get it done by next March and April, which will be shared with growers as well.
And a second question would be as far as organic certification. Are any of these organically certified?
Wonderful question. Whether the biodegradable plastic mulch can be used in organic in the US? No, they can be used in Europe. In the US, they don't allow it to be used. While polyethylene, if you are an organic grower, you can use it, but you need to make sure you pull the polyethylene mulch from the field of your production season.
Hi, Juan.
Hi, Eric.
Hey, would you advise taking the plastic off after 6 months or after 1 year, or how long?
Would I recommend taking off the plastic mulch, or what's the time period it should stay in the field? And that's a good question. I think it really depends on which type of plastic you are using. Like for polyethylene, I think you can keep it longer. Sometimes growers think, what I mean longer, we are actually testing it. We want to see whether we can leave it in the field for 2 or 3 years. Sometimes grower might think, oh, if I leave there, my kinberry, they produce primary kins, will that restrict the primary growth? So far, we didn't notice any negative impact of that. For biodegradable plastic mulches, you don't actually need to move it. It will deteriorate or biodegrade over time, depending on thickness. But the one we use, which is 0.5, 0.6 mil in this climate, after 6 months, it will starting to deteriorate.
Okay, and then I have a two-part question, if I may have another moment here.
Yeah.
If you've got the primary buds getting damaged under the mulched trial and then lower yield, would you have expected there to have been higher yield in the PE mulched trial block if there hadn't been winter damage? And do you think the results that you saw where you had higher winter damage, would it be different in not such a severe year?
So I think your question is referring to the summer planting where we didn't find difference between yield. The harvesting time was delayed and the yield was similar. It was not decreased, the yield. But even the primary buds were not damaged, I wouldn't assume a higher difference between different treatments. Why did I say that? First, if you just look at the vegetative growth of the data, PE mulch and bare ground pretty similar. So the vegetative growth can be transferred to the fruiting yield. So I wouldn't speculate more yield under the PE mulch. And to answer or to go further to answer this question, the summer planting was planted in August 2017, and the first harvest in the summer 2019, which means that plant has around 16 to 18 months to grow. And maybe for this cultivar, the bare ground, so due to this longer establishment period, it also reached its maximum growth. So the vegetative growth for the potential for this plant cultivar in both trial are the same. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Got one more question for you.
Yeah.
In a test that's been done by me, or not by me, but near me, it had this little fork that went in the ground to punch a hole to put the plants in. But being an old timer, I was kind of a little curious about whether there's enough room for you getting the primicanes to come up through it to have a proper cane count, or do the primicanes break through that tarp?
That's a very good question. So you concern whether the use of plastic mulch will restrict the primicane coming from the crown area, and that's actually one of our concerns. So we measure the primicanes monthly, and we married a monthly. We didn't notice difference between like without mulch and with mulch. And remember that most of the primicane that grower wants to keep is actually near the crown area. So when the primicane grow, they actually can find the room to coming out from the planting hole, or they actually are near the planting hole. That's the ideal primicane that would be always saved for the plants. And actually, so in addition to that, or to thinking a different way, if you have the mulch, you restrict the primicane that coming from the buds on the roots, actually save the carbohydrates for the plants to produce a higher yield, or to allow those carbohydrates to be saved for later primicane growth. So for when you use polyethylene mulch, and so this is how we think, you might not need to burn your primicanes earlier in the season, which is usually done in April, in May. Did I answer your question? Mm-hmm. So your concern is whether the planting hole is too small to restrict the growth of the plants. The raspberry plants will eventually open up the hole when they grow. So the mulch is flexible. The plant can open up bigger when they grow, but you still can control the weeds and keep the unideal primicane down. Okay.
All right. Thank you. I think we'll go ahead and move on.